morning and welcome to this morning's webinar, The Value of Being a Board Member. Thanks to everyone that has joined us this morning. This webinar is part of a series of activities to help our organisations develop strong and productive relationships and to take leadership in providing services across the East Kimberley. I am Alison Gibson. I'm a proud Noongar woman and I work at BBY as the Community Development Advisor. Today we are talking about the experience of being a director of local Aboriginal organisations. Helping with the webinar today is David Ross, Coordinator Business Support with Wunan, and we have three well-known East Kimberley men who have many years of experience serving on ACCO boards. Before starting, I'd like to acknowledge and pay my respects to all the traditional owners and custodians across the Kimberley. We're all very fortunate to live on beautiful Kimberley land and would like to pay my respects to all the people who participate and live on this land and contribute to our beautiful communities. At the start, everyone's microphones will be switched off. This will just help with reducing any background noise. If you do want to ask a question, please raise your hand. There is a button down the bottom of your screen. If you move your mouse, you'll see some icons pop up down the bottom. One of them is the raised hand one. The other one is the chat box. If you open that, you'll be able to communicate with our team here. And if you have any questions or any issues along the way, just send us a message and we will sort that out for you. Jenny will be monitoring that the whole time and be communicating through there with me. So if there are any issues, please use that facility. We're hoping that people will ask questions and participate in the session. So if something does come to mind during the webinar, please write it down and we can have a bit more of an interactive session. So today we have a great group of people here to talk with us. David Uri is a Mirawong leader and is talking with us today from Mirawa Dawang Wurrung Language and Culture Centre. Jamie Elliott is Director of Wunan Foundation and in his second term appointment to the Aboriginal Lands Trust. Des Hill is Chairman of the Board of BBY, Empowered Communities East Kimberley and OVARS, and has previously served several other organisations. But before we begin, the first question we'd like to ask our listeners is, have you ever been asked to be a board member? We'll just give a moment.
Sorry, was that question, have we ever been asked to be a board member?
Yeah, have you ever been asked to be a board member?
I have initially, on the first board I sat with, is with the Kimberley Land Council, because I used to work for the Kimberley Land Council during the years of when the Mabo decision came down and then when the Native Title Act came out. I worked for the KLC for about 7 years in doing native title claims and stuff like that. And when I finished working for them, it was the elders here in Kununurra through Warringati at the time that asked if I could actually represent them on the KLC board for the region, and that's how I first got on the being involved with the boards.
Excellent. Can I ask how long you've been involved with boards for, Des? Sounds like a long time.
Since leaving the Land Council, which was in '97. Yep.
Wow, years of experience. At the moment, we don't have David Nuri on the line. He may join later, but we're not sure. But hopefully he can join us and share his thoughts as well. We'll now go on to supporting this webinar with David Ross, the Coordinator of Business Support, Governance and Leadership. In this role, David has travelled to most communities of the East Kimberley, talking about the roles and responsibilities of boards. How are you today, David?
Yeah, no, I'm good. Thank you, Alison. Thanks for introducing me and inviting me onto this webinar. Yeah, so I've been at Wunan for about 5 years and started doing the governance about 3 years ago. And our governance program is funded by NIAA, which is a National Indigenous Australians Agency, yeah. And yeah, so we've got that funding. And it took a while to really get up and going because of just the preparation and thoughts that go into it. So obviously strategic planning and all that sort of stuff, which is what organisations need to and directors need to really get into. We had a Jawan secondee come in and do a review of the Indigenous governance in the East Kimberley. A lot of those issues were, there were three main root causes of our poor governance really, and that was lack of clear purpose and accountability for impact. People lack the tools and skills required to run a corporation, and structurally being small and remote limits governance capacity. So from there we developed, or Barry King's the manager of the governance unit and leadership unit at Wunan, and so we've been going out to communities and working with corporations and directors over the last, well, I've been for the last 3 years, and Barry's been there for 5, I think, yeah.
Nice, excellent. And I know you get around the East Kimberley quite a bit, doing different work with different services, so you're quite well known out there.
Oh yeah, and there's different of levels of governance. I mean, over the last 3 years, or even with Barry's, we've had over 156 directors that we work with, and only one of them really had a degree, and not many finish year 12. So, you know, there's a lot of work to be done in regards to really having corporations running properly. Back when it was done, the review, it was 80% that were in breach with ORIC and not doing the basic governance, and that's just having your meetings, doing your AGM, and also reporting back to ORIC and probably the other Associations Act, all that sort of stuff. So it's there's plenty of work to be done. We had a CEO and Chairman's conference in Broome in May, and from there we did a presentation, and they want us to go into the West Kimberley as well to start doing that sort of stuff as well, because a lot of the communities are getting left behind just in governance as well.
Right, yeah, I think people come on to boards, ask to be on boards to bring all different kinds of skills, and the governance part is something you can upskill in and learn so that you can do better in that space.
That's right, that's right.
So have you been asked to join a board at all, David?
No, I haven't.
No, it could be something in your future.
I have been on board in the territory back in the day, so yes, I have.
Yep.
But over here, I'm pretty happy where I am, and I probably have been asked a few times. I just couldn't remember when, but I'm happy doing what I want, and the more I help more boards and more people, the more we get upskilling these guys to be good directors and have good governance in communities.
Fantastic. So can you tell me a little bit about why organisations have boards or committees?
Well, the communities need to be, you know, to survive really, because there's a lot of them, if they don't, they're going to end up back in towns and won't, you know, like you got remote communities that don't have managers, CEOs, and because of that, the boards don't really know their roles as such. So we're trying to get with them to, one is just have the basic meetings so they can get the communities up and running and having programs for their kids and for the future. And a lot of that is just basic stuff, and that's not even considering commercial stuff, you know, as much as they'd like to, but their skills just aren't that up there at the stage. We're doing as grassroots people on boards, you know, and a lot of issues we have is there's a lot of old people on these boards that have been there for years. So how do we get the young people coming in and getting on boards and running their communities? Because that's where they need to start thinking of, because that's especially with their on country stuff. And
these are the places people can have a voice, isn't it? And
that's right.
Try to have a direction of getting everyone working together and developing different, whatever's important in your community.
That's right. That's right.
And having that governance.
And a lot of these, when they do have their meetings, a lot of these people don't even have access to their rule book, which is number one Bible. Like I'm pretty sure they probably have a Bible more so than the rule book. That to really know what their purpose is in regards to being on the board. Yeah. So.
Right. So can you tell us a bit about what you talk about when you do your training work with agencies in this space?
Well, like I said, it's mainly the main basic roles of being on a board is one, to have your 4 meetings with quorums, and then to have your AGM at the end of the year and to report it. And that's your basic, and obviously all your objectives are in your rule book. So get the rule book, read the rule book of what you need to do to get your organization and community running as you want it, and start setting up where you want to be now to where you want to be in 3 to 5 years, as in strategic planning. So that's where we pretty much start off, and just getting the basic. You make your decisions. We're not going to tell you what decisions you need to make. It's you make the decisions in regards to you knowing your rule book.
Yeah, it's about
and that's just a basic.
Isn't it?
That's right. And then it goes back to where they can get funds, where they can make commercial entities out of what they've got in their communities, really.
Yep. So it's getting that good foundation where agencies are set up well so that they can build on that. And that's where you come in to be able to support them. Yeah.
And if there's some other issues like legal or accountancy and business, we have access to some funds to maybe get a lawyer or an accountant. Wunan have iBase as part of their entity, and we've used iBase to deliver some financial training as well, just a bit more than what we've got, and then business side of things. So we've got a lot of those people around town, and we have some fund that we can help them to access people to help them with those issues of business, legal, and accounting.
Excellent. So you've got the right contacts and can make sure people are making the right decisions in that space as well.
That's right, and we've been around, and Des attended that forum in Broome as well. And from there, I think we're trying to work a Kimberley network to look after 19 communities. Some that don't have CEOs. Let's try and get some funding from the government, and they're sort of supporting that at the moment. But that's a network that they're going to be trying to work in the next 12 months anyway. That we're working on.
Yeah, lots of things happening in that space, and getting bigger as you go, by the sounds of it.
That's right, and it's needed. NIA asked us, how long do you reckon it'll all be done? Well, how long's a piece of string, really? Because you got young ones coming through. They're going to be the elders soon, and then you've got another lot coming through. So, in this new world of COVID, they need to be more safe and proactive in regards to their policies on the communities.
Yeah. I'm wondering if, Des, you attended that, was it a forum just recently? Would you be able to share some of your thoughts with us on that?
Well, it was actually quite surprising. It was actually the Department of Communities called together all the tier 1 communities that have got 100 plus members on the community. So there were 19 of them, as David said. But it was quite surprising the issues that are happening on many of these communities, and quite surprising that they actually still run as communities, considering that they haven't got CEOs. There's really no support at all on their governance side of things. It's just more or less certain leaders within the community that are sort of keeping the ball rolling and things happening on the community. And we pushed in, like David said, we had a talk, we have to find a way of getting government out there, or government resources out there to help these people with CEOs, but also with their own governance. And I think that considering they haven't got CEOs, many of them are doing a good job considering the resources they receive.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is skills that people develop over time. So there's no wrong time to start. It's identifying that gap and getting in there and trying to improve on that straight away. And I think some people have been left to do it on their own and maybe not had the support they needed in the past. So it's good to hear that these bigger forums are talking about these issues and how they can support these smaller groups that are struggling to operate in ways that other agencies are able to. I might just introduce you, Des, as a well-known local community man. He's currently the Chief Executive Officer of Kununurra Warringah Aboriginal Corporation and Director of BBY and the Ord Valley Aboriginal Health Service. Could you share with us your board experience? You have a little bit already, but you might want to speak a bit more about it.
Oh, well, firstly, I was on OWAS and being the OWAS rep on CAMS, which is the Kimberley-wide organisation. I have since stepped down off both of them, but I am still sort of in the other two. Although I have stepped back up onto CAMS on the Kimberley Aboriginal Health Research Alliance as a board member. That's just very recent. But funnily enough, where I got sort of asked to represent the Kununurra people on the KLC, when I finished that and we went through the old final negotiations they were through before Mirrong Gajarong got set up, and I had no intentions of going back on any boards. So I was just concentrating on being employed within the ECHOs. So after the negotiations, I actually worked for MG Corporation as a future X officer for the stuff and also the board implementation officer that had to keep state on us on what they had to do with the Ord agreement. Whilst I was a staff member and then attending board meetings, I realized that the people who are on the board, I mean, no reflection on them, but they're well and truly beyond the eight ball. And David mentioned this in passing before about the Associations Act. A lot of our directors, even now today, on some of our organizations, are still working within the belief that they're under the Associations Act and there's no consequences for their decisions.
Right.
And I could see that as a staff member of MG Corporation. So when I left MG Corporation in 2010 and moved across to become CEO of Warringah, I pursued getting onto the board of MG Corp. And I gave myself a timeline of 2 years, only to go in there and get the board up to date with the CATSI Act, not keep working under the Associations Act, because they were just going to dig a big hole from something they were able to get out of. And it took a while for them to understand that not anymore is the CEO can get in trouble and get locked up. You could be sharing a cell with them because the new act says that you're liable as well as CEO. If they do something wrong, it's your fault because it's a question I kept them online. So it took a while, and I kept getting told that we're not miles, and we've been on board for years and years, which is good. It shows they got interest in their corporations or their communities, but they've got to understand that there is a big shift from CATSI or Associations Act to CATSI Act on their responsibilities and the legality of it. So I went across and did that, and while I was in there doing it, out in the community, you could hear about some disruptions and things were happening within OVARs. So trying to be like put my cape on and go and help these people out. I actually applied to go on the OVARs board, and it was the same thing. We had directors there who were passionate and keen and all that, but they were still running in their own minds. They're in the mentality of Associations Act.
Right.
So that happens, and not going to sort of shirk it, but even the MG boards, the Warringah board is the same. We've got young ones. We've got a few young ones in there now, but when I first became CEO, we were dinosaurs. And even though they had the passion, they never changed with the act. That they stayed under the old way of doing things.
Right.
I'm pretty sure a lot of our echoes across the Kimberley and elsewhere, with the older ones, are still under that way of working.
Yes, yeah. So I guess that's why that training and the governance is so important, that people are aware of what their responsibilities are and the decisions they make do have consequences as well, because there are legal ramifications for that.
And I think I'm in a sort of advantage position is because not only being a local the wrong person. I actually sit on the Warringati board as a non-member director. So every time there needs advice or changes, I can tell them as another director. Whereas a lot of organisations, the CEO won't say that, thinking that thing, and most of our CEOs are non-Indigenous.
Yes.
Right? So having, and I think this got to happen every meeting. As soon as there's something going offline, you have to bring them back and remind them what the Cassie Act is. And what they're And but if you keep doing that with some of our boards, then the meetings will go, instead of 3 hours, they'll go for 10 hours.
Very true. Yeah, it's important to make sure that there is those people that can bring it back to what the requirements are and the legislation and what your requirements are for running those meetings, so that not only can it stay on time and on track, but that you are making decisions within your powers and acting appropriately as well. And like you say, not everyone has that background information, so making sure we share it wherever possible is really important as well, so we pass it on to the next generations.
But also sort of being involved in these meetings when I was staff member and all that. And I hate to say it, but it's the truth, and it has been that way for a long time. That a lot of our old people, they think everything the white man says is right, is correct. So they will agree with them. And you watch the body language. If the person up there asking the question is shaking their head no, and nodding their head, they'll say yes. If they're going side to side, they'll say no. Right. So it's just the body language, and we're trying to get our people to understand. No, they're not telling you to say yes, but that's the way it used to be. Yes. That whatever they say is the right thing, well, it is the right thing, which we know today's age it's not. A lot of our Aboriginal corporations and communities got ripped off over the years because of that mentality.
Yeah, that's why it's important to know exactly what's going on and have all the information before you, and be able to make those decisions and share that information independently. Yeah,
because it's your community and it's your corporation.
That's right.
So what happens there is up to you.
Yes. And sadly, as you said before, some people have been ripped off and they come in and out of our communities, but the local people are here always. So it's really important because we feel the fallout of any wrongdoings, of making sure that it is all above board and happening as it should.
And it is now, and you can see the feedback from government, all that, and they're very wary now of coming in, because they know that they're not going to get what they want just by asking for it.
Yes, that dynamics has changed, which is powerful. Yeah. Is there any achievements that you're proud of that you'd like to share with us from being a board member across the years?
I think the successes we've had with empowered communities, actually, for us, and I take my hat off to the BBY staff, really, even though we direct them, is for a small body like that to actually bring in 25 different Aboriginal organisations. It's a miracle, really. We've been trying to get government to just bring 6 organisations together, 6 of their departments. It's impossible. But for us to actually bring in, and not from the same area, I mean, we're talking about right across the East Kimberley, to have, so when I stepped down as the chair of BBY, I got to feel very, very satisfied at what we set out to do. We actually did.
Yeah, it's remarkable. It really is.
And it's still a work in progress.
Yeah, and it's across so many different sectors. Often you have lots of agencies that are like health or legal or education, but BBY does have 25 organisations that are very broad in what they do as well, and all working together to improve communities. It is a wonderful achievement. Thank you so much, Des. We might just hear from Jamie now. Jamie Elliott is from Halls Creek. Jamie has been on the Wunan Foundation board for 8 years and is in his second term on the Aboriginal Lands Trust. Hi, Jamie. Glad you could join us this morning.
Yeah, thanks, Alison. I've got to ask you, who are you to Jared Gibson?
That's my husband.
Oh, there you go. I played footy with him down at Perth, at Perth Football Club,
Oh,
and
that's how most people know him.
against him in the Sunday League too. So
Oh.
I noticed that he was up here, caught up with him the other day. So great to meet you
Yeah,
too.
you too. You too. I'm sure I'll see you more.
Yeah, for sure.
Could you share your board member journey with us?
Yeah, I guess my first introduction to a board really was as the coach of the Warringah Crows. There's back in 2004, I got roped in by a cousin of mine, Donald Chalong, and then the board of Warringah Crows to take on that coaching role for about 3 years. And in that process, I've become a board member of that organisation. So I guess I never planned on being on one, but it just came with the territory. And then I guess after I was working up here for Aboriginal housing at that time, and then I basically went down and started up the Halls Creek Clontarf Foundation down there in Halls Creek. I think it was at the end of 2007. Seeing that the town was pretty dry of things to do, opportunities. So I started up the Halls Creek Sports and Community Association. And I guess when I founded that, what comes with the territory is governance. So so get involved with that. Next thing you know, I'm the chairman of that organisation, running basketball competitions, doing other things throughout the town. And Ian Truss and Ralph Addis, I think, caught wind of some of the stuff I was doing down there in Halls Creek, and probably needed a representative from down that way, and asked me whether I'd be interested in joining the board of Wunan Foundation. So that was probably back in 2008. So that I first jumped on the board of Wunan Foundation. So that was my introduction to board life. I never really planned on doing it, but because I had a big passion for my community, being involved, engaged at a hands-on level, it was just a natural progression into that, I guess. And I think I stepped down from the Wunan board for about 2.5 years, where my wife and we moved over to Sydney, and we started up the Kimberley Education Excellence Program. And I then became staff of Wunan, so part of good governance.
Yeah.
I stepped down off the board and became staff for that 2.5 years, starting up the KEEP program, and then moving back to Kununurra, I guess at the end of 2013. I then wrote a letter to Ian and just let him know that I'm available if the Wunan board was looking for another member, and I got reappointed then back to the board. In that time, I started working with the Water Corporation, and having worked for housing, I had a lot to do with Aboriginal Lands Trust, because I looked after a lot of the town-based reserves and remote communities for housing management. And Des Warringah was one of those organisations when we introduced housing management to communities in and around here that I worked with in the past. And I guess one of the things that I've struggled with my current role then with the Water Corporation and with Aboriginal housing is dealing with Aboriginal Lands Trust. And so I remember driving through Ngaliwa, there's that red fire hydrant, and that was always leaking, and doesn't matter where I went to try to find out how can I get this fire hydrant fixed. Didn't really know anyone who could help me out in that regard, but then a few people saying Aboriginal Lands Trust, and next thing you know, an advert came out on an email saying expressions of interest to sit on the board of the Aboriginal Lands Trust. And so I figured, oh, well, I'm going to chuck my hat in the ring, and if I get on, then I'm going to fix that fire hydrant in Ngaliwa. And so the rest is history. I joined Aboriginal Lands Trust. It's my second term now. I've got only one more year to go. And I guess the first thing I did when I got on board was fix the fire hydrant in Ngaliwa.
Excellent.
So that's sort of my little journey. I also sit on the Dean of Vibe Waterfront Apartments in Darwin. So it's a hotel in Darwin, and that's because we have ownership. Wunan Foundation has ownership shares in that resort. So yeah, they're sort of three of the boards that I sit on currently.
Yeah. So would you say that you got the push from community as well to take up these positions, or the support, the backing from them to take that step and become a board member?
Not necessarily.
No?
I mean, the demand is there.
Yes.
And if you don't step into it, then who will? And someone does step into it, and I guess, and it's much like, and I'll talk about the East Kimberley Footy League. You know, Wayne Paul's a good friend of mine. He chairs the East Kimberley Footy League, and people want to complain about Wayne all the time, but they're the same people that vote him in as a chairman every year. They stand to say he does a marvelous job with a lot of criticism and all that. But I think if you want change, and sometimes you need to be the change that you want to see.
Yes,
you know, and you know, so and so that was like myself, is that if there's a void there, and I've got a passion, I've got an interest, then I'm gonna take that opportunity, and that's just been my sort of principle throughout my journey.
Fantastic. Sounds like it's got stuff done. It's been really valuable to the communities that you've been involved in. Yeah,
I guess to that end, you know, like one of my highlights, and I asked Des that question too, I guess, on the Aboriginal Lands Trust, you know, I remember sitting in a board meeting, and Patrick Green from Fitzroy Crossing, he described Aboriginal people as being dirt rich yet cash poor. And that resonated with myself, you know. I think, well, how do we change that? You know, so I guess one of my highlights being on Aboriginal Lands Trust is working with the late Gregory pastoral property. He was a pastoral property that was just lying dormant for about 40 years and never really made a dollar for the local people there. And just being on the trust and Aboriginal Lands Trust, and being able to work in with that group to try and untap the economic potential of those properties there. And now they've got themselves in a deal, in an arrangement. And you know, once they're making a bit of money off, there's job employment, so there's scope for them to be to manage it. But there's also scope later on to actually run their own cattle station, and if they do it right. And everything centres around governance, though, and
yes.
And so it's really, really, really important to actually take it seriously and commit to it.
Is there any advice you would give to other young Aboriginal people moving into leadership roles?
I guess leadership role, I guess, it's a noble task. It really is, you know, and you need to have a vision, you know, and a passion. I mean, I guess some of the things that, you know, some in leadership, there's going to be some decisions that you're going to make that's going to be popular to some, but then again, unpopular to others. And I think part of leadership is about having a spine, you know, stand on the courage of your convictions, you know. I'm not saying that decisions you make are right or wrong, but once you make a decision, you make a decision and you stand on that, you know. And if you make a mistake, then you talk about that, or you don't dwell on it, you fix it. So I guess it is a noble task, leadership. But I think that for any young people is just to understand the forms of leadership that they currently have right now, even in their own peers. You know, you can see that in school. I think the first thing to do is actually recognise people's leadership when you find it, and actually teach them how to manage that right now, because they do have a lot of these young people and kids. They have influence. They have a following. You know, so I think it's very important that we don't see it in sort of a formal corporate governance sort of a structure, but recognise governance when we see it, even outside of the framework of corporate governance. It actually does exist. You know, in a school. But so how do we teach them to be able to manage that? I guess is a great segue into the corporate space of which we sort of operate on not-for-profit.
And value that within themselves as a particular skill and something that they bring to the table that other people don't. I think when I look at board members for Aboriginal organisations, there's very different and unique skills that we bring, rather than sort of your mainstream governance ones, which might centre around degrees and PhDs and all those kinds of things. But we have other skills that may not be as a piece of paper from an institution, but very high level as well, and incredibly important in leading these agencies further and having that strength to, like you say, stand up and take on those positions and take on that power and make those decisions that others don't often want to go into that space.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, like, and why I speak into it that terms, I really think it's important that they focus in on themselves first. You know, I think and Des and Dave will probably agree with me, when you try and carry the weight of your people on your shoulders, it's not easy. And I think no one really can carry that load, and we've got to be realistic about that. And as a young person, you know, we do stand on the shoulders of giants, and there are policies that have changed, the legislation that have changed because of the shoulders of giants that we've stood on, you know, and some of the freedom that we enjoy today, you know, I sort of encourage people to run their own race. You know, go out and study, do well in school, do what you have to do, go be an electrician, you know, just experience some life a bit, you know, because then coming into a situation whereby you are responsible for this people at such a young age, there's a lot of pressure that's involved with that, because like I said, you're not going to be everyone's cup of tea, you know. But you know, with that experience, what they get through education, through studying and all that, they'll eventually come back in a more equipped manner, and you know, I guess the difference between being 20 and 30 is 10 years, you know, and that's a great deal of experience. So, you know, and so that's just the main thing I sort of also encourage kids to is to put themselves first in a lot of situations, because if they don't, no one else will.
Absolutely, and it's a marathon, not a sprint, isn't it? We don't want people there for 5 minutes.
Yeah, or being exhausted and lost in the space because they've been burnt out, or because what one person said to them hurt their feelings. And you know, and I think a large part of resilience is built along the way. But I guess as a young person, when you're still going through your growing stages and you're trying to work out your own identity and who you are and where you fit into the scheme, I guess any bit of criticism could hurt a bit more than what you are when you're more advanced. Yes.
I think that comes back to what you said before about seeing those leadership skills in the younger people and growing those, so that when they get to the older stages and involved in this stuff, that they do have that resilience and that strength and know exactly who they are.
And the last point, I guess, is I've been fortunate to have a few mentors in my life, you know, and you know, and one of those being Ian, you know. So since he sort of spoke to me in 2008, I've been a willing servant. You know, I've been willing to be taught, you know, and you know, I had a late Uncle Jonathan Bates and my brother Donald Cox, you know, both pastors in All Three People's Church, two of my senior people, but two of the people that I really love dearly, and sort of allowed them to mentor me throughout my life and really learn from them, and takes, you know, you got to have a bit of humility as well. But as a young person, you need to recognize those that have gone before you, you know, and shadow them, learn from them, and at the same time give them the opportunity to learn from you, the next generation as well. Sadly, I don't see too much young people actually doing that. And you know, like I said, I've sort of followed Ian around since 2008, and it's been very interesting. I mean, a large part of what I've learned, to be honest with you, has come through my experiences with him, and that's even from my own finances, managing my own affairs. You know, one of the things he said to me was, Jamie, if you always do what you've done, you're going to always get what you got. And that sort of baseline will sort of helped me to see things differently from what I did. So we have a lot of meaningful discussions and all that. But they're only conversations that you can have with people with a lot of experience below their belt. So the opportunity to sit with your David Ross, Des Hill, David Newry's, Ian Truss of the younger people, you've got to lap it up. You've got to take advantage of that. And so that's the other big advice I'd get to people that desire leadership position, is actually sit with people who you work with now and learn as much from them as you possibly can.
Yes, absolutely. I once did a leadership course, and what stuck with me is you've got to lean in. And I remember standing at the back of an event, and they had all ministers and CEOs and everything up the front, and I was with the state ombudsman, and they said, do you want to sit up the front or do you want to sit up the back? And I remember those words of lean in, and then, you know, conversations start and people get to know you in that sphere, and you learn from them. And you learn what's expected in those environments. So yeah, always making sure you lap up those opportunities and learn as much as you can wherever and whenever you can. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your experience and sharing that advice as well. We might just go back to David now, and he's got some more information to share with us. I think he's got some slides to share with us.
We were over the slideshows. I think we might just worry about, you there?
Yeah,
Not yet. I was just thinking, just in regards to what Des and Jamie were talking about in regards to elder people and how do we get younger people in there. And Jamie talked about the footy being those boards. We were looking at with our programs trying to get onto Wayne Paul and how do we get young leaders maybe getting onto the footy boards, you know, as a learning step to get into governance, leadership, and doing that sort of stuff. Because as you know, on a footy field, as a coach, you're everything. You're a mentor, you're a doctor, you're mum and dad as well. So there's all that sort of stuff of these things that need to be done. And I think when you develop, not everyone comes out leaders. People, as Jamie, you just did it. Some people are, you ask them, you encourage them along, and they'll take it away. And you need all those help. And I think a lot of these boards do need that. But certainly mentors, yes, you need to, and you've got to have a desire to be a leader. I think
on that front, like David, I think one of the questions that, like, given that we just roll into the East Kimberley Football League, you know, you've got all these different football teams.
Yep.
And the question is, do you really need? Let's just say there's 10 teams within the East Kimberley Football League. Do you really need 10 different football clubs, or could you just have the one association of which the 10 football clubs become members of? Because I think one of the things we've got to realise too is that, like Des pointed out, there are a lot of legalities. There are a lot of responsibilities that are involved with actually being a director and member of any organisation. But I guess what's happening as well is we've got to think about efficiencies. So it, you know, can you really look at ways of funding 10 organisations individually? Because what then you're doing, you're going to need sponsors, and sponsors will pick one team over another. You know, I think if everyone came together and formed the one, then as the one, it'll make it a lot more easy and more attractive and more appealing for people to invest into. I'll fund this. I'll fund all 10 football teams by simply putting it into this corporation or this particular legal structure, because I know that this owns, or this is the membership base of the football teams, are the membership base of this organisation. So there's other creative ways that we need to start looking at running things, right. Because quite frankly, it's that's one of the things that we need to bear. It's one thing wanting to have a voice, but how strong a voice you want that. I think we're a lot more powerful together as one than what we are individually. So even when it comes to those communities, you know, the thought of having an entity that represents the interests of those communities, and how do you structure that out? Because when you think about it, that entity represents 10 football clubs or 19 communities. That's a powerful entity within itself. And then you need to worry about one CEO, maybe office managers in different places, one accountant, you know, or whatever it is. So just the efficiencies that you get through governance really needs to be considered, especially in this day and age where money is hard to come by.
That's right. Well, and the other one on top of that is, I mean, if you've got your 10 clubs in the East Kimberley, are they going to have meetings very often? And then you get people that can't make it, so they're missing out. So they're going to feel left out if they're not in the decision making as well. So that's against it, just being devil's advocate, I suppose, in that regard. And then in
but all great discussions, and this is what forms.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, Des, did you want to add anything to that? Oh, you're on mute.
Just come back to that question before the last question you asked Jamie about, you know, what would you say to young people coming on board? Similarly to what Jamie said, right? Learn from you, the ones who've gone and done it before, but also if you're on the same board or in the same community, is listen to them, have the respect to listen to them and take on board what they're saying. But if you think they're wrong or you have a different opinion that you think could be better, then don't be afraid to speak up, because a lot of our young people do not speak up against elders, and a good opportunity can go past. But also, it doesn't matter where you go, whether it's into a job or into a community or to an organization, get to know it. You need to know what it's about. You don't just go in, right? You need to go in there being on top of the issues, what you know that's happening in there, if you want to sort of make an impact.
Yes, yeah. Can I just take you back to the point you just made about speaking up if you think something can be done differently, or maybe something's being done that's not by the rule book or whatever, and speaking up against elders or our people older than us in our community can be challenging, but within this, it's a different space, I think, is important, and that we all got that responsibility to do that stuff. Could you share a bit more about that with us, Des?
Well, I think it's crucial that if you sit on a board that you have to speak up.
Yes.
If you see something's being done or on its way to be done wrong, that could have consequences to the board, you need to speak up, whether it's coming from the elder or it's coming from CEO. You can't just sit back and just, okay, he said it, so he's the one that's making the wrong decision. It's not being afraid to speak up. I mean, we've had some, Ian and I have had a lot of good meetings, and a lot of times that Ian and I, we've had difference of opinion. But no good sitting back and don't give your opinion back, because they don't know what you're thinking.
That's right.
Until they know what you're thinking, then that gives them an opportunity to either agree or compromise. So you're back on the same sort of page. If you just shut up when the person you try to sort of negotiate with or having a different opinion with, they'll win that sort of situation because you decide to step back. And I only use Ian as an example because him and I have sat at the BBY table and had a few good discussions, difference of opinion, of course, but at the end of the day, we sort of left the room with more or less the same. We agreed on going down a certain path.
Yeah, it's that respect for each other, and you don't have to agree all the time, but you can be respectful to each other all the time.
Oh, if you agree all the time, you don't need both of you there, do you?
Very good point. Summed it up nicely.
and I think on that too, Des, I think one of the things that we sort of struggle with is that we do live in a small community, you know, and so we're still at a stage where we're still trying to, I guess, figure out what is conflict and what is not. That sort of discussion that is had is not conflict. It's just a difference of opinion on a certain level, and I guess we're still growing to a stage where people are used to, when you share difference of opinion, then that's an argument, or that's not a good thing within our community. But when it comes to what we're talking about now in governance, you got to welcome it, you know, and you got to understand. And you know what, it's not easy. It's really not. I mean, Des, you and Ian have had your things on the board table. Well, I've had to do that too with him, you know. And he said, and it's not easy when someone who you highly respect and you know you carry the bags for and you're really followed and all that. But I guess such as his leadership, though, he's been fantastic with myself and sort of encouraged that. I'm sure he wants to just give me an elbow in the jaw a couple of times. But I think one of the great things about his leadership is that he's allowed me to be me too. But in saying that, I've had to come out and have that bit of courage and ask certain questions. And there's an art too, I guess, of how you put forward stuff. You know,
yeah, absolutely.
You know, you got to really be considerate of how you put things on the table, because there are certain ways you can do it. You can say one thing one way and the same thing another way, and you can be successful one way and you can be go horribly wrong the other way, and it all matters in the way you've actually approached that and how you put that forward.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because maybe having those little debates has been a benefit, because when we have our empowered community leadership meetings that Ian chairs at the national level, and when we dial in, it's funny because I'm more in the Kimberley on a daily basis than Ian is, because all his travels. But every time we sort of give our comments and things around the table, he always seems to finish with, hang on, Des, you got anything to say? Because he might be seeing me toe the bit or something about which is good, because I'm giving a perspective from me on what's happening in the Kimberley than from what Ian's giving from what's happening in the Kimberley, because I'm here more often than he is, because he travels a lot.
Yes, yeah, and it's understanding that we all bring different views and thoughts and knowledge to those discussions, and making sure that they are included where appropriate. And it sounds like Ian really appreciates your knowledge from being here and seeing what's happening on a daily basis. Now we might just go back to David and let him finish off what he has to say. So we've only got 10 minutes left, and we want to hear what the rest of the presentation is from you.
Oh, do I need to do my presentation?
It's been a good talk either way, and I'm sure we've covered off on some of the stuff that you've got there to talk
that's
about.
right. Well, like I said, this is just some basic stuff. So I don't know if there's anything would like to see it, and they might want to, but certainly
Sure, Dave.
Just an introduction to governance. This was pretty much previous before the banking inquiry, because after the banking inquiry, they came out with similar, the 10 principles of governance. But we'll go with this introduction. See how we go. Okay. And this is starting from legislation, which is a CATSI Act, incorporations, as you can see, types of organizations, business, the rule book, being a director, 5 legal duties, 10 principles of governance, success models, and question time. Okay, so all organizations, business in Australia must register to be incorporated through one of the acts, which are governed by ORIC, the Office of Registrar of Indigenous Corporations, CATSI Act 2006, the Australian Investment Security Commission, ASIC, and state government departments, which are associations. And so yeah, they're your sort of legalization, so enabling corporations. So incorporations enable boards to manage their business and other community activity group activities to establish separate legal entities that can limit personal liability to members, remain the same despite changes in membership, acquire, hold, and dispose of property, incur debt, sue, and be sued. The benefits of being incorporated enables organizations and businesses to have better access to funding. And I think with the ORIC one, ORIC compared to gives more federal government funding compared to the Associations Act, which is more WA, isn't it? I'm pretty sure. Protection of assets and intellectual property, and protection of personal assets. The types of organizations, as we mentioned before, in the Kimberley: cultural and political, service delivery, multifunctional, remote community governance, commercial business, PBCs, which is prescribed bodies, corporate, pastoral lease organizations, passive land and or asset holders. The rule book, these are all the contents that are in there, and this is what all directors should be really know everything in there. That's all your duties in there, really. So being a director, a little different between being a director on a board for a not-for-profit organization or being a director on a not-for-profit. One's largely ceremonial appointment to rubber stamp management. And actually, I think that one is a little bit more still happening in communities as well, where the CEO, pretty much everyone listens to them. But hopefully it's not that. carries a high level of responsibility as directors are dealing with organisations who receive their funding from the conduct of commercial enterprise, government, or from individuals through membership fees. While all organisations differ in purpose, size, structure, and operational, I can't see that, methodology are defined by their governance guidelines, rule books. Where's that right in the middle? All right, there you go. Competently require the director to acquit their duties competently, diligently, and according to their legal obligations to do so. Adhere to the basic principles of governance. Duties of directors. Aboriginal, the CATSI Act sets out the duties required of directors and other officers. The duties are consistent with the duties under the Common Law and in Corporations Act 2001. There are 5 legal duties of directors. Duty of care and diligence, duty of good faith, duty not to improperly use position or information, duty to disclose material personal interests, and duty not to trade insolvent. Okay. Directors must carry out their duties with reasonable care and diligence and take care of responsibilities seriously. Follow the corporation's rule book. Never miss a director's meeting and arrive in time. Read all the pre-meeting background papers. Know their corporation's financial situation and are not afraid to ask a lot of questions, especially if some of the matters presented to them are complicated or unclear. Breach of this duty may result in civil penalty, but not criminal liability. Excuse me. And duty of good faith. Directors must exercise their duty in good faith and in the best interests of the corporation, must be honest and loyal with each other and with the corporation. Never make a decision for your own personal advantage and must act in the best interests of the corporation as a whole. Breach of this duty may lead to civil penalty or criminal liability if the breach is reckless or intentionally dishonest. Directors must not use their position or use information obtained to gain a benefit for themselves, someone else or of their family, I suppose, to cause harm to the corporation. Never pass on personal details about members to other people, and never give out information that might allow someone competing for a corporation contract an unfair advantage. Breach of this duty may lead to civil penalty or criminal liability if the breach is reckless or intentionally dishonest. Conflict of interest. Directors must tell each other of their personal interests in matters relating to the affairs of the corporation. Conflicts of interest may prevent directors from acting only in the best interests of the corporation. Remember, at all times, a corporation's interest comes first. Conflicts of interest must be declared to the other directors. Such a declaration does not mean a director can't be part of the meeting, but they must step out of the meeting while the matter is discussed and not be part of the decision-making process unless they have the fully informed consent of other directors to be present and vote. It's okay to have a conflict of interest so long as it is declared. Breach of this duty may result in a criminal penalty. Directors must not allow the corporation to trade when it does not have enough money to pay its bills when they are due. To be insolvent is to be unable to pay debts when they fall due. Directors fail in their duty if they authorize a transaction or make a decision which causes their corporation to become insolvent. Breach of this duty may result in a civil penalty and, if dishonest, a criminal penalty. These are the old 10 principles of governance: roles, board composition, purpose, strategy, effective meetings, good risk management, board performance assessment and development, managing organizational performance, including social impact, culture and ethics, and fiduciary obligations and stakeholder engagement. Yeah, I won't worry about that one too much. That's about it. Any questions?
Thank you, David. I was just talking while I was on mute there.
David,
Yeah.
thinking back to what I said earlier about how some of our people on the boards still got the mentality of being under the Associations Act instead of the CATSI Act.
Yep.
Have you ever thought when you do this presentation to actually have the old Associations Act listed on some of the concerns on that side that that our mob still...
Yeah, we have thought of that, but we haven't gone there yet.
And to say, well, who still does that? And they put their hand up and you say, well, sorry, you can't do that anymore. This is how you have to do it. And you show what the comparison with the CATSI Act. Because I think all this ORIC training that they send, ORIC governance training, that what they do every year or the different organizations, I've never actually sat there and heard any of their presenters give a comparison to what the Association Act.
Yeah, well, no, we haven't really done that. We know there is a little bit of a difference, but yeah, we haven't really compared them just yet.
Yeah, just ask the question, put your hand up who still does this one here, and people, a majority of them would, because that's how they've been doing for years. And you can turn around and say, well, that's illegal now, you have to do this one.
Oh, okay. Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
But not every point, because there are a lot of stuff in the CATSI Act that hasn't changed from the Associations Act.
Yep.
But there are those have changed that's made it illegal now to continue doing that practice.
Okay. Yep.
Something to think about and
That's
possibly
right, yes.
include later on, David.
Yeah, no, well, even Barry, my boss, has asked me to get the Associated Act so we can compare and
Yeah,
see
I think
what
that would
is going on.
help.
That's right, and I think we've only in the Kimberley. There's only a couple that are on with the Associations Act actually, so
Yeah,
not
I
that
think
many.
it helps having that concrete example of this used to happen, but this is what needs to happen now.
I think that might be the go. Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah. Well, we've come up to 12 o'clock. It's the end of our session here today. Thanks so much for all of you for sharing your experience and knowledge. I really appreciate having such a breadth of knowledge and expertise and experiences, and a good discussion today. It was quite interactive and really enjoyed speaking with you all.
Thank you for
Thanks, Alison. Yeah.
Thanks for bringing it together.
No problem at all. Thank you.
Cheers,
We
guys.
hope to talk to you again soon in some future webinars.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
All right. We can just be a bit more less formal.